here. Jelly's the only one I saw. No, Jason Powers. Jason and Director. Yeah. Are the two that I've seen. And then you know Charlie, right? Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay, we're live.
Or just do whatever. Just introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Thanks for selecting our panel today. We're looking forward to an engaging conversation and kind of sharing with you the background and the development of this section of the plan, how we got there. And each of us represents sort of a different perspective from the industry. I'm Rosemary Moudry, Executive Director at Westcart CAMS. So representing sort of the executive directors and that mindset as we were working on the platform. And then Michael Elliott here representing Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and Hawthorne representing Tremont West and the Economic Development Working Group. So it's a really great group. Do you guys want to get to introduce yourselves too?
Yeah, I'll start off. My name is Michael Elliott, Director of Neighborhood Economic Development for Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. I'm very happy that you all have decided to join us in person as well as over the internet. From our perspective as a intermediary working on behalf of the CDCs is really to help CDCs connect the dots. One, while they're doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to neighborhood and community economic development, we want to come alongside them and make sure that, hey, we are just here to support you. We are here to make sure that we are connecting dots. We are making sure that we're providing opportunities where some of the burdens, kind of like the question that was asked earlier, some of the burdens are lifted off of them and given to the appropriate partner out there. Sometimes we do put a lot of work on CDCs. We kind of have this vision sometimes or put them in a position where we feel like they have to do everything for everyone. And I think there's a lot of partners within the community that can definitely help lift some of that burden. So we want to help them identify financial resources or partner resources that can assist them in the great work that they do.
And Michael provides an extra interesting perspective, I think, because he's worked at the city in economic development as well as through another funding organization and now at CNP. So he can really you're just such a tremendous asset because you can see from a really wide range of perspectives and sort of help us in the industry better understand how each player might act.
My name is Khalid Hawthorne with Tremont West. I'm Real Estate Development Director there. Also, as Rosemary mentioned, the co-chair for the Economic Development Workforce Group. So in my daily role, mostly internal development activities as far as our housing and affordable housing for rental and purchase as well. But historically, I have dealt with a lot of our economic development with businesses, especially during COVID, which was a huge undertaking. And as a group, I think our economic development working group really came together during that time period to look at the issues that were, or bring to surface the issues that were from smaller businesses, some of our more long-term successful businesses, trying to make sure that all their voices were heard during that period of disruption. So those are things that we continue to work together on, figuring out how to work, bring more economic development and business activity to our communities.
Excellent. So we're going to kind of dig right into each of the sections and kind of each one of us is going to tackle one of the sections, and then we're going to do some interactive dot activities, and then just do sort of a conversation with, we have some leading questions if needed, but I have a feeling this group will be thoughtful and ready to engage in conversation without any prompting. So again, my previous role was in economic development in Old Brooklyn, and then coming and working on this plan with other executive directors. I think we were really conscientious about the things we were hearing from the Economic Development Working Group and the things all of us knew that our teams struggle with in terms of trying to work on our main street. So as I kind of specifically talk about some of the points in neighborhoods and main streets, these really come out of the conversations that, like, when I was on the working group, we have been having for 5 to 7 years as a group. And so to me, this is like such a moment to say, okay, these are the things we know. We've been talking about it for a long time, and now is our chance to really succinctly articulate them and, you know, ask for some actionable items that will translate to making our jobs more impactful. So, and I think part of that starts with asking the city and the mayor to articulate a clear strategy for neighborhood transformation. And so this one is, I think, it's kind of important. It's not dictating necessarily what that transformation is or what that plan is, but it's saying, you know, we need a strategy and a roadmap. And I think if you put it together with the other piece of the plan, which is around culture and partnerships with the CDCs, hopefully those two things then come together and say, okay, we want the city to have a neighborhood-wide strategy, whatever that looks like. And we hope you'll invite us to the table and help you develop that strategy. So on your first day, call us up. We're ready to meet and support you in whatever you need to make that happen. The second piece of it is around our main streets. You know, one of the things that many of us know from having rehab buildings or purchasing buildings as CDCs ourselves is that, you know, in the city of Cleveland, we have aging buildings. We have a lot of landlords who deferred maintenance. We don't have strong enforcement policies, or we didn't for many decades. And so that when we acquire buildings or when partners acquire buildings, the amount it takes to bring them back exceeds what you can then charge small businesses for rent, or you can get from apartments or whatnot. And so it's really asking the city to help us continue to think about how to invest holistically in our commercial corridors through the restoration of our buildings. And again, this one is action-oriented, but not super prescriptive, because I think that there's a lot of different ways to get that done. And the hope is that they'll invite us and other key players, whether it's developers or other economic development experts in our community, to the table in order to help come up with the best, most efficient strategies for getting that done. The third point is something, you know, all of us just, you know, have had on our wish list for many, many years, is a white box program, right? You know, there are things like vacant property initiative at the city that are really terrific tools for dealing with the shell and the outside of buildings. But that's often not enough, right? You get the building to operational, but then, you know, in the suburbs, the buildings are already white boxed. And so to then ask a business to take on building out a space totally from scratch is just a huge capital ask. And so we need to be able to get our spaces further so that we can attract the type of businesses we want in our neighborhood, as opposed to the sort of predatory or scrappy businesses that open up at midnight and then close, you know, the next midnight. So that's really where that came from, is that I think, you know, we just need to support small businesses in that way if we want them on our main streets. And then finally, a comprehensive marketing plan for Cleveland and its neighborhoods. And I think this, you know, CNP has helped lead some of this work in and of itself, but this speaks to what is Cleveland's message to its residents? What is Cleveland's message to its outside world about why we're a great place to be, why its neighborhoods are interesting? How does it tell its story effectively? And I think the key piece of this is that cities who have been successful, you know, you don't just have some random person in some department come up with a marketing strategy. You hire and bring in an expert who can help you and help lead that process. And so I think that's sort of a key piece of this is that external support. Like, we don't have to feel as a city or even as an industry that like, it's not okay to ask for help. We can't be experts in everything. So it's critical to bring in experts so that we can deliver high quality product to our community. So that sort of wraps up my section. I'm going to pass it over to Khalid. You're tackling, no, Michael's tackling small business. Sorry, I don't know how I got that wrong. It's like ridiculous.
Okay, no problem. So small business development is going to be critical. I think that's pretty obvious. After working with the city of Cleveland for 5.5 years, and before starting this position 18 months ago, I used to work for National Development Council, had the wonderful opportunity to travel throughout the country. And there's something very consistent. Every major city has pretty much the same issues. What I didn't notice a lot is, how should I put it? A lot of people talking about the positives of what they are doing in their particular city in a meaningful way. And I think, living here in Cleveland pretty much all my life, I like to lead with the positives. I like to talk about the positives that we are doing, and allowing that to be a very effective, how should I say, economic development, attraction of businesses, and retention of business strategy. And so if I know that every major city has XYZ problem, if I want to attract businesses to the city of Cleveland, of course, with the CDC's being point on that, we need to make sure that we're demonstrating why we should be the city that they should choose. And I think a lot of the partnerships that we have are a great way of demonstrating that. I'm gonna say this, and I say it all the time, City of Cleveland, this region has great partners at the table. We have partners that are talking with one another. We have partners that are at the same table with one another. And I'm very happy to be a part of this small business ecosystem. One of the things that I enjoy a lot about this ecosystem is that, for example, with the leadership of GCP, we have the Business Growth Collaborative, and that's pretty much all of the major service providers to businesses all coming together once a month to talk about economic development challenges that we have. Another partner that we have, and again, those are on the ground, but then we have partners like Team Neo that's represented here as well too. And we also have other partners out there that have that regional approach. And we need to, one of the things I'm always challenging myself is not just always thinking about the city of Cleveland. I know the name is Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, but Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is not some bubble within itself, that we're impacting other regions as well too. And so one of the things that I'm always talking about is making sure that we're communicating with businesses that, the importance of our ecosystem and that we can provide support to your business, whether that's the Urban League of Greater Cleveland, whether that's Hispanic Business Center, whether that's Team Neo. There's structures and partnerships in place that if you want to move to the city of Cleveland, if you want to do business with the city of Cleveland, I'm not talking about just the big 5,000 employees type of entrepreneurship or businesses as well. I'm talking about the mom and pops. Cleveland is an excellent place to come to start and grow a business. And I think we can do a better job at communicating that. And I believe that CDCs are on the ground helping us tell that story as well too. Establish a temporary use of variances for pilot projects. I'm just reading off of the pilot here. Projects that must be renewed on schedule on a scheduled basis to encourage innovation and experimentation in our neighborhoods. One of the biggest things that kill business, especially small businesses, if you put in place processes, bureaucratic structures that slows things down. Three things that businesses are looking for. They want to know about the risk, they want to know about the cost, and they want to know how quickly they can get something up and going. And we're putting in place structures, we're putting in place bureaucratic challenges or hurdles. They'll grow across the border and go to Cleveland Heights, or they go to another city where they can find processes that are a lot more easy. So one of the things that we're trying to do and communicate to administration is that let's reevaluate what we have in place to see if it still makes sense. And let's have that same entrepreneurship kind of mindset that we're asking our businesses to do as well too. If they're going to take a risk and invest in our neighborhoods, invest in the people that are here, we need to make sure that we're doing things that's going to support them and not going to create roadblocks for them as well. And lastly, convening financial, philanthropic, and economic development partners to leverage public investment and programs to establish a new fund for forgivable capital for business expansion for targeted enterprises such as women and minority-owned businesses. We just kind of mentioned that already, a white box program that started in the mind of the Economic Development Working Group. Again, this group meets every other week to really talk about the things that matter most to small businesses. And so from the leadership of Khalid and Lucas, who is at Old Brooklyn, we're thinking about innovative programs within our particular service areas to help support small businesses as well.
Okay, so I will talk about a little bit about development policy in Cleveland. First of all, I want to start by saying development is important in Cleveland, but we're not here specifically for development, right? When I say that, we for the hit as far as Cleveland's concerned, yes, there were developers such as the Ben Swearinger brothers who led the growth of the first largest suburbs in Cleveland and things of that nature. So it's always been an important piece. But since we had this long history of I would say decline and things of that nature, there was a period where we begged for development. Right, we're getting past that to a certain degree in some neighborhoods. Others, we're still trying to encourage development in those areas. I think that's where this policy comes into place, is trying to figure out how do we balance out the so-called hot neighborhoods, which in the grand scheme of things aren't, but like if you look at other cities, they're not that hot. But for the most part, most developers are trying to get into the Tremont, the Hyatt City, the Detroit Shoreway. How do we branch that out into the Glenvilles and Huffs and the Southeast Lee Harvard areas, things of that nature. So getting that balance so that we're not stuck with overpriced properties in one area of town while others are still sitting fallow or derelict to a certain degree. Or part of that is the form-based code. For people not familiar with that, basically it is technically it is a outcomes-based development code, right? We have an outdated code right now. It's basically the last time they changed it was maybe 50 years ago. Very suburban oriented. So people wanted large lots and single family house, things of that nature. So what does our code say? You have to, if you want to build in Cleveland, you have to have a large house, a large lot, which the average lot is 1/10 of an acre. The code specifies you basically have to combine 2 or 3 lots to meet the code, right? So it defines that as a suburban oriented development. So, but the form-based code will allow the current houses that are currently in Cleveland, some built 0 lot lines, some are built, 3 to 6 feet apart, things of that nature. Some houses that are built behind other houses, things of that, and that's the impetus for the form-based code, to allow that gentle density between within communities. But we also don't want to forget that it's about community. And you can have density, but it has to be thoughtful density. It has to bring people along. The community is an important aspect of that. So if we want to have a form-based code, we have to go to the community and see what are the characteristics of specific communities and how does that community want to develop itself, right? What are the corridors that we want to develop? Do we want transit-oriented development? Do we want that development to have affordability complex? Those are things that things that are implemented in other communities as far as the code is concerned. So yes, you can have more density, but okay, for these number of units, maybe you provide a percent of more affordable units. When I say that, they're not the level of affordability that some people are used to in our communities, but lower than market rate. So that is a form-based code, very technical term. People, and if you ask two planners, you might get two different answers, right? So let's just keep it at that, but knowing that it's all about making a more consistent development environment that everybody can agree on, whether it's developers or the community. As far as tax policies, this is huge. Something that we've been working on for, specifically working on tax abatement policy has been out there for a while now. But then you also have property taxes, which we had a study done. This was pre-COVID, BC, before COVID. So we started that process like right before COVID hit. Still continue. I still think it's still continuing as far as the discussion is concerned. But there's a lot of good input, and I do think we will get to where one of the important pieces is the loop legislation which requires state backing. And so basically what loop legislation is long-term owner occupancy discounts for property taxes. So what you have in Tremont is a tax abated house, $400,000, that's paying $300 to $500 a year, beside a house where somebody's been living 20 years. Their property taxes have gone up, but they have a limit, they're on a limited income, so they really can't take advantage of that until they move out the neighborhood. So with the long-term with the loop legislation, depending on how it's structured, it could help flatten out that, so they're not getting those 200 to 300% increases in their property taxes. We figure out whether there's a minimum or, because we talked about high neighborhoods and reducing the actual abatement in those neighborhoods, which developers would say that people won't move here. There are non-tax abated houses now that 15 years ago they were tax abated, come off the market. They are selling at market prices. People are paying those market prices, which some to me are above ridiculously high. They're paying those market prices, and the property taxes come along with that. So I beg to say that the market is there. The tax abatement program has worked in those particular areas. Maybe we can pump the brakes a little bit in those areas. But we do want to have a larger conversation of how to encourage development in areas, as I mentioned before. Also, we want to encourage people to rehab houses, right? Right now, you're penalized. If you fix your house up, you got to pay extra taxes on that house now because it looks better. But you're almost if your house is falling in on itself, your property taxes are lower, and you're almost incentivized to not do anything. So we need to actually look at that, determine how do we change our tax structure to make sure that people aren't penalized for bringing their properties up to code and having, or just letting lay fallow vacant for years upon years, things of that nature. So those are policies that have been discussed. And I think all of these tools that Rosemary talked about, Michael talked about, all these work together. They're not individual tools. When you start putting them together, it's like an engine, right? Your engine has different parts to it, but there are external factors that need to come to play. You need air, you need gas, right? But it still needs that spark, right? And if the spark plugs are bad or not functioning, we talked about earlier as far as city government and how we feel and administration and things of that nature. We also need to look internally at ourselves as far as how are we operating? Are we maximizing and partnering with each other, maximize our resources that we do have. Business. We can't operate nonprofit, government, civic sector without business. It all comes together. Once all those parts start moving together, your engine starts functioning. It stops knocking.
Well said, Kylie.
Right. So I don't want to go over too much, but I just want to put that point out there and try to bring it all together as far as how this economic development plan can come together.
Excellent, excellent. I also just want to, for folks, clarify too, in addition to the sort of housing tax abatement and that conversation, part of this is also looking at commercial property and specifically to what Holly spoke to on vacant and derelict properties, basically proposing that the city look at a structure that penalizes owners for keeping properties vacant and incentivizes them through tax structures to get businesses into their buildings, because we see this time and again where a resident comes and they say to us, I don't understand why there's so many vacancies or why that building has nothing going on. And their businesses call us saying they want to be in a building, but the owner, there's deferred maintenance, there's this, there's that. It's better for them to just let it be than to put somebody in it. And so that's not a great structure. So I think, just layering that into the puzzle, just making sure that we look at tax structure from both a residential and commercial perspective is, kind of part of the economic development side of the coin. Now we're going to do the dot exercise. Is that true?
Yes,
Right?
that's
Michael, I think you're the leader of the dots.
Yeah,
So
we don't want everyone kind of coming up at the board at the same time. So we do have someone that's going to assist us. Did everyone get a dot? 3. Awesome. So Divya's going to come around with the board and just right there in front of you, just going to put your dots on the board, and then we're going to have a conversation about kind of where everyone puts the dot at. The goal is really to kind of, you see what the plan is, kind of what do you think are the priorities, what things that we should definitely continue to lift up to the administration, and we'll just have further dialogue about what kind of happens.
And you can put 3 dots on one thing if that's what you really believe in. You can put as many dots on as you want, or you can put 1 dot on. So
You want to read this out? Do you want to read this out first so everybody has an idea, or?
Did everyone have an opportunity? Yeah,
Take a
I
look
think
at
everybody
this
has
one.
the brochure.
yeah, I think you can take it around. Yeah. And let folks put their dots. Yeah, so to Khalid's point, like you can put all your dots in one basket, or you can spread the love however you prefer.
So while we're doing that, can we keep the conversation going?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, what questions do you have for us on the platform so far?
I have 3.
Okay.
So on the white box, I love the idea that you're working group, do a back of the envelope, how much money do you want for a pilot program? I think you should. Just to begin the conversation, right?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
Second point on the taxes, we completely agree with what you have written, as well as what we just mentioned about existing property owners. And that's not written on the recommendation. So, you're gonna talk to the candidates and their administration, but they're gonna read what you get. And the point about trying to equalize, right, and assist the long-suffering, long-committed residents who are experiencing the increased tax and not eligible for the abatement. It's something we've talked about for years and never really tackled. It is time to talk about it, especially what's happening in certain neighborhoods. And then I see under the housing, there's like aggressive code enforcement. We know it stopped at some point. It needs to come back. It needs to come back to commercial code enforcement. And that's not called out under Main Streets. And that ties nicely with your point about a vacancy tax. So I think
I think, yeah, the issue of commercial code enforcement is definitely a challenge. And for those of us who have tried to do some work around, a particularly egregious case in our neighborhoods, there were several cases that I spent all 5 years of my time in Old Brooklyn working on, and still had not concluded at the end of that. So it's an arduous process, but one that is critical. And hopefully maybe the sort of tax, some of those other policies, whether it's form-based zoning and those policies also can help with that, in that there's incentives and structures in place to make it harder to let things be and to not follow the rules. Sometimes I feel like the city of Cleveland makes it harder to follow the rules than to not follow them right now. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point.
Regarding the white box, the ED working group and Khalid, of course, definitely add more color. We have been working in partnership with the CD working group to kind of figure out what that will look like. One of the things that we definitely settled on is we want to make sure it's a pilot program. We want to make sure that we're testing it out. One of the things when it comes to programs, I believe, is that we just like to feed money into it over and over and over again, and not really taking the time to really make sure it's effective and doing its job. I think we go a lot kind of in the work that we do, kind of good feelings and good intentions. And sometimes we don't sit back and just say, is this really doing what it's intended to do? So we are committed to doing like a year, 18-month pilot of the program. Right now, we're working to make sure we have the right partners in place as far as when it comes to funding, who's going to administer the program. But that is definitely something that we look forward to working with the city and other partners and rolling out very soon.
And specifically, we're trying to be targeted with that pilot as well, so that it's a visual impact within a specific corridor or two, right? Yes, you can change the storefront here or change the storefront there, but sometimes you don't get that visual impact when you spread the butter, right? But if you're able to do a couple of businesses, also 2 or 3 businesses are renovated, the neighbors start looking and say, okay, there's something going on here, right? And so it incites other people to make investments as well.
On that point, sorry to monopolize, but I'm going to say something else. I agree with what you're saying, but there's a problem with that, right? If we're only investing where things are happening, then we're not investing in other places. And there's something quite, inequitable about that. And in the whole discussion of investments around here, we act like the places that are hot became hot overnight. They did not.
Right.
We started investing there 30 years ago, maybe longer, right? They're not overnight sensations. And so it is very important to your first recommendation about a strategy, right? That we have strategic investments and that we state what our goals are and we work towards them. 30 years if it takes, because it's possible to achieve.
To piggyback on your point, I tell people all the time that there's no market study 30 years ago that says start a restaurant in Tremont, right? They would have looked at you like you're crazy. Even still, the number of restaurants that are in Tremont, the neighborhood does not support that based on a market study. Those first of all, those individual business owners who invested and built up a base that was beyond just Tremont, but throughout the whole city and the county probably. And so, but also now we're looking at, okay, how do we stay competitive when you have the Pinecrest, the Crocker Park, and all these other places that, yes, people from the suburbs don't necessarily have to come down, or if they come downtown, then they go to East Fourth, then they go to East Bank of the Flats. So how does Tremont, in this particular instance, stay competitive with those other areas?
I think also to your point about, the idea of a 30-year overnight sensation, we definitely sometimes forget that in Cleveland. And I also think it's, we need to pilot things and continue to tweak programs, but we also have to give programs a chance to work. And I think that's another challenge that happens in Cleveland is when we don't see an immediate result, like a Main Street, it takes, 5 years to sometimes get one building developed and changed, right? So like if we also keep pulling out the rug on things before we actually let them see if they can succeed, I think that's a challenge too. So it's, giving things time to breathe and actually see results before we switch them up. I think that's really important and it's a challenge in Cleveland. What other questions do you have while dots are still happening, or are the dots done?
They can be, I just didn't get any dots, so.
Yeah, Dr. Kelly.
I have a question from online. The question is about how CDCs acquire properties to redevelop and lease to small businesses. Do CDCs do a lot of that kind of activity? Is that financing easy to come by, or is it a real challenge? And then does the city provide a loan for CDCs to do this type of work?
That's an amazing question, and I feel like we all will have some answer to that. I think the answer is that CDCs do engage in this work. Some do it a lot and some do it a little. And I think some of it depends on the availability of property and the ease of acquisition of commercial property in their neighborhood. That doesn't mean, just because it's not easy, doesn't mean that it actually isn't important in some cases for a CDC to do it in more difficult to acquire neighborhoods, because sometimes it's the difference in ensuring, as we're trying to shape our Main Street to make it sustainable and vibrant, by having property, we're able to help ensure that there's a balance of different types of businesses, the mix that neighbors are looking for, right? That we can be thoughtful about, okay, we know that residents have wanted a coffee shop for 10 years. So like, that's what we're gonna look for in our building. I'll defer to others, but I would say, yes, sometimes the city helps with funding, but it helps CDCs in the same way it helps any other property owner or developer. We're treated the same way when we go to economic development with a project as a developer would be. And the tools that are available to us are available to anyone. And so I would say, yeah, financing is difficult, even for a $1 million project, that I worked on, which is small in the world of development, right? We had like 5 or 6 layers of financing and grants and things involved, maybe 7 or 8 when you add the grants in. So it is a complicated process even to get the smallest of projects done.
I'll also add, we're going through a strategic plan, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. So we have 2 subsidiaries, Village Capital Corporation and New Village Capital, that we are seeing how can we better align those 2 subsidiaries to better support the work of the CDCs as it relates to acquiring buildings, but not only just acquiring buildings, but also having the capacity to finance them, as well as to manage them as well. That's a whole nother task involved that many CDCs unfortunately don't have the capacity to even do. They could be dozens of available spaces, but if a CDC doesn't have the capacity to do it, whether it's technical know-how or money or whatever the case may be, that's a whole nother kind of issue that we're hoping that through our strategic planning process, we can find a way to support the CDCs in this effort. Because it's very important, to your point about the white box, it's very important that in those particular areas that need that investment, we can make sure that we're raising the capacity of the CDCs, both financially, as well as, with the human capital, it will better usher in kind of investments within those neighborhoods as well.
I want to reiterate, it's hard work, but it's necessary work. And that's I think that's where we come in and to Jessica brought the question as far as where do CDCs fit in. We fit in those areas where it's hard work that doesn't necessarily fit within market dynamics, right? Where a developer will go by this property and say, "Oh, that's just too much," well, that's our lane. That's where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I also loved Michael's point about it's not just about, I think a lot of CDCs, especially one of the challenges of smaller CDCs who don't do a ton of buildings and properties is then the, like, to Michael's point, the management side of it. And so, you know, I think while it's not directly in the platform, you know, a complementary piece is the work that CNP is doing to help CDCs then do property management. Colleen had mentioned in her panel before, like she almost asked people like, what keeps us up at night? And man, property management is what keeps me up at night. Like, oh my gosh, there's another leak in the roof, right? You know, that keeps you up at night a lot.
So I'm just looking at the board over there. Seems like there's a strong support for looking at the tax options. There's strong support for the white box, strong support for partnerships. So any thoughts from the group regarding those kind of high priority areas?
Yeah, why did you guys select those? And you know, obviously we know why we liked them, but you know, what speaks to you guys about those?
So I'll speak about the taxation part, because that's been the eternal challenge for us in Broadway Squatting Village is, you know, our folks squatting on property, waiting for, you know, for folks who took advantage of the recession back in 2009, bought properties on the cheap and are waiting for that lottery to come through to such an extent that, you know, several years ago when we were the first neighborhood to have
Chain reaction.
chain reaction, think I'm like critical mass, that's not even chain reaction, that we had property owners that we had set up ready to host businesses or sell their properties at a premium. For these businesses, all of a sudden jack their prices up, and it killed a lot of businesses that would have, or kept a lot of businesses from coming in. So that's anything that we can do to encourage investment and discourage rent seeking, basically, is going to be important.
Thank you.
And I just think, you know, I would echo what Chris said, and what came to mind is that when I started in this industry, gosh, like 15 years ago, a mentor said to me that Cleveland has a lot of patient funds. And I didn't understand what that meant until I really got into this work and realized that people will have a building, pay their taxes, do just barely enough to not encourage enforcement, and do absolutely nothing else. And you'll approach them with this idea and that idea, and we want to do all these things together. No, unless you have $1 million, I'm not listening to you. And it's like, what planet are you on? And to Chris's point, I don't know what lottery folks are waiting on, but that tax issue is huge, because in some ways it rewards people who have resources to do that, and we're still penalizing small businesses and even residents who have stuck it out in neighborhoods. And then sometimes, you know, when the tax bill does go up, finally, once things start happening, they're pushed out. So there is real inequity right now in our tax policy. And then I'd also say, somewhat adjacent to that, I also did vote for the white box, because, you know, what I've seen a lot of times is that, you know, people have great ideas, and then they look at a building and it's just too far gone in terms of what they're able to put into it. And then what we have to offer, storefront renovation. Great program, but it only addresses the exterior. You have to spend all of the money up front, then wait for a rebate. And there's a lot of people, certainly in my neighborhood, that just cannot operate that way. They don't want cash to put all that out there. And they need to address the real serious issues on the inside of the building, as well as serious issues from the outside.
Yeah, that might provide that carrot and stick approach with those vacant properties. The carrot being, of course, you know, funds are available to get that property up and over, you know, so that you're ready to host a business. The stick, of course, you know, basically compensating for the loss of tax revenue by not having a business with staff, with income taxes and sales tax revenues coming in. They go together.
How does everyone view partnerships? Again, I have my opinion. I stated that earlier, but we got a lot of partners in the room. Is there a better way we can work together? Is there something missing? I view CDCs complementing a lot of the work that the small business development centers do. A lot of times we think small business development, we think of small business development center. Like that's what we kind of think of. But I look at them providing like back office space or work for entrepreneurs. CDC is kind of that front office work. They're the ones that's working on the placemaking. They're the ones that's kind of creating the environment that once you get your business financials together and you get that loan, you need somewhere solid to be and supportive of there. Is there something missing when it comes to partnerships? Can we do that better here? And how can we maybe, what do we need from maybe the city to kind of help us incentivize more collaboration if it's not there?
This is something we talk about partners in our service area. We don't talk about how we should partner together, work as a whole together. So if we're, like we're here, this is what they feel we actually did. But we're hearing about what everybody has basically done or what you said, but we don't keep up with each other throughout that year. So if I hear from what's working in College Village, what's not working in Collingswood, that might help me better what I'm doing.
Thank you.
I think partnerships are key because all things we talk about that we provide for the residents and so on. CCs can't provide every single one of those services. And neither can the city, right? Like, so it's about who can we bring to the table. So we're talking to the property owners and the property. The county plays a role in that too. Being part of that policy. The state's gonna have to do something. And then oftentimes we think about development and we think that, well, they don't necessarily have to. They have the capital and do things that we need to do. But the city and the citizens don't. How do we bring them to the table and keep them in a box? So they don't take over the neighborhood, but can do those developments that can help them kind of what we're trying to do.
I mean, I think to your point, when you find there are developers who are invested in Cleveland because they are part of Cleveland. And so I think it's also, you know, all of us collectively knowing who those folks are and ensuring we help make projects easier for those folks as well. I think, you know, being a partner with a developer can be really a powerful tool. And we've seen, I think, in the last couple of years, a couple of good examples of developers who really do want to do the right thing. And I think, you know, our power with developers is also to the point about being unified across neighborhoods is if we have a collective vision and we have, you know, if we have zoning that's implemented equally or equitably across the city, it also, and we have design review committees that are equitably enforced across the city, then it also doesn't allow developers to play us and play against us because we're all working together. And so whether you're going to Tremont or Glenville or West Park, you're going to get the same answer in terms of the quality of design that's required, in terms of the quality of landscaping that's asked for. Because you know, in my experience, even within one design review committee, they'll look at different sub-neighborhoods and they'll enforce a different standard of landscaping and things like that. And that's not, you know, that's not really fair to the residents of Cleveland who deserve the same quality of project regardless of where they live.
So we're really talking about two different types of partnerships here. Okay, there's, you know, you've got that vertical integration, right? Where you've got the CDC working with the developer, working with the city or the county or urban league or what have you. And in that kind of a vertical partnership, having that warm handoff between partners is really critical, because as soon as, you know, you drop the ball between one and the other, that project can fall through. And it's very difficult for all those partners because everybody's got to be ready at the right time to be able to get that handoff, right? So you've got that. The horizontal partnership that you're talking about, Clea, is, I think that is still a remnant of what John and Alifa was talking about when it came to CDC's battling against each other. I mean, for a large part, when it comes to funding, we're not having those particular issues. Housing development, certainly not community organizing. We're really good at working with each other to come up with new ideas and sharing that. There's a business that's coming to us. I'm not talking to anybody else about that unless something good happens and I'm able to share, hey, this is how we're able to work with it. And that's something that we have to get over. Right? We need to be better about saying, all right, maybe we're not sharing this business, or maybe we are saying, you know what, somebody's coming to us and we're saying, we don't have something here for you. But have you talked to Julia over at St. Clair Superior? And that's something that we need to be better at, especially because we're not a growing economy. We need to be, but until we get to that point where we're willing to share, it's gonna be real tough.
I like that comment. I especially when you said that this is not a growing economy. So if it doesn't necessarily benefit me right now, I'm thinking outside of my neighborhood and say, hey, I don't want you to go to suburbs, for example. I want you to stay here in Cleveland. So let me make sure I'm connected with my network of CDCs so that, hey, I don't have it now, but please go over here and check this out because they may have you. Because we're competing against other folks. It's just other options for businesses to choose. We got to make sure we're telling the story that Cleveland is it.
I'll just add to that, moving on, we see the lease plans for Pinecrafts, for Beach and Walker Lake. We know what tenants they're talking to. So just the same thing as we're talking about the CDC. We're competitors, but we know what this person's doing. So if they call us, I will call Pinecrafts and say, what deal do you want for them? Because I'm not going to give them a better deal. You know what I mean? The private sector does it all the time. CDC should be doing it as well, making sure that the business is the best place. And like I said, keep them included. That's key, keep them included.
And I think to sort of, you were speaking to the county, I think to take this to the next level, this year is the mayoral race, but next year is the county executive race. And I think we all also have to keep our eyes to that. And I know that's already been a discussion taking place amongst the executive directors and our staff is, a platform doesn't look the same, but we need to, again, deliver a unified vision to the county and the county executive race about what is needed to help keep our region strong and our county strong. And I think that's where, yes, we're competing with the suburbs, but we're competing as a county and as a region as well. And so what can we do? The suburbs can only thrive so much if the center and the heart of the region is failing. And so hopefully that inspires all of you to start reaching out to us and CDCs and CNP, Michael and stuff, to say, okay, this is where I think we should go with advocacy at the county level, because I think that's really the next, that's the next target we've got on our list. So maybe that's revealing our cards too soon, Melinda, hopefully not. But I mean, we've got to keep taking this and keep delivering a unified vision as an industry and as a city, I think.
So Rosemary, on that point, have you gotten an agreement from CNP to take on that charge?
We haven't, where I sit, I'm not sure, maybe the executive directors work with Colleen a lot closer, but where I sit, I haven't heard the conversations yet. But I don't see why we would be opposed to not. I mean, we exist because of CDC.
I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Okay, first I work with children. Day one will be talking to the county, right? The neighborhood platform.
There we go.
Yeah.
And really a unified, talking to the first suburbs as well as the city of Cleveland, because again, to all the way back to Colleen's panel, while the challenges sometimes look different or the symptoms look different, the underlying challenges are really similar. And we could deliver a more collective impact for all of us if we put our heads together.
I'm going to raise Team Neil. Your Team Neil is in the room, and they can definitely help us in figuring out what that is. Again, you have that regional perspective, but you also work with all the counties, Cuyahoga being one of them. The information and the data that you all collect can definitely help us tell that story.
It's very interesting listening from the neighborhood level, regional, working with 18 counties. Our goal is to ensure our county still when businesses are coming. We don't want one business
doing my, if I go to Lake County, I can't talk to guys on town. We want to make sure we're agnostic in the process. Because we want there to be an equal opportunity for all businesses to feel like they can come to our state and do so and find the best place. And it creates a little bit of an opportunity for Team Neal to sit in a very protected space because we don't want, say, for example, if Google comes in and chooses Cuyahoga County, then all of a sudden they choose Breakout. Cuyahoga County is going to be really unhappy with Team Neal to go to Lakeland. So it puts kind of a very careful position. We have to be agnostic in the process while lifting up the region as one. So that is the same mindset that from a neighborhood level, how do we lift the neighborhood as one so that we can do the things that we're all going.
I'll mention like a more specific example. So Lee Harbor, community with a very unique history. I will say it's one of the large, there's a large conglomeration of African-American businesses there, of diversity of African-American businesses beyond just food industry and things of that and beauty industry. But you also have Lee Road and Shaker. Lee Road and Shaker, they're talking about how do we revitalize Lee Road and the businesses around it. But that goes hand in hand. There's imaginary lines here. And the stronger that Lee Harbor is, it all works together, whether it's Lee Road, Shaker Town Center, all that should work together and it complements Van Aiken and all these other areas. But like I said, we have at least 4 or 5 municipalities within this whole area. Do they work together? Probably, for the most part, no, right? So we need to start having those type of discussions because it's only going to benefit all of us.
This is what I think is also for after that, to take advantage of the equity of resources that are available, even in Neal, there's resources available for our neighborhood to use to invest in the community and help drive economic development, in particular some of this attention and perspective. So it's just something to think about. Michael has been great at working with teams that work with us to help drive some of that. And I've heard many of you aren't to look at that. And Neal normally isn't in this space, but there's still opportunity to advance that work together. We're still talking about regionalism and how we drive it together.
I think we got time. This is 3. Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you gained some additional insights. We are open to partnering with everyone in the room. So please contact the local CDC. Please contact me at CMP. We'll be glad to help out in any way we can.
And I think just, we hope that the points in the platform that speak to you, that you'll continue to use these talking points with your council people, with, if you have a chance to meet one of the mayors, with residents. So the more of us that use the same language and hit on the same things and the same nuggets, when people hear it enough times, they can't ignore it. So, let's flood them with the same message. So thank you all. This has been a pleasure.